Pass City Council meeting. We start our meetings off with a moment of silence. So please join me for that. And please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have Councilor Pell coming in the back, and Councilor Frazier is on the phone this evening, so everybody is present. DJ, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Give Rob a second here to take his seat. So first order of business tonight is going to be electing a new council president. Councilor Frazier, who's on the phone, has been our council president for the last year, so thank you for your service, DJ. And what I'm going to have you do first is take oral nominations for your next council president, anybody who you'd like to nominate, and then we should all have a slip of paper, bright yellow, at your desks that after nominations are over, we'll do a kind of a paper ballot for your preferred candidate, and then after that, I'll read the names that appear on the ballot, and we will go with a motion for your preferred candidate.
Sarah, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are the votes going to be attributed to councilors, or is it anonymous vote?
I have been asked in the past to attribute them to councilors, so that's what we'll do.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So first up, nominations. Rick?
I'd like to nominate Joel King for council president.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Kurt?
I'd like to nominate Vanessa OJ.
Any other nominations? All right. Any discussion? No? Yes, Rob?
Yeah, first I'd like to echo what Sarah said about thanking DJ. I think DJ did a very good job as council president, and I appreciate the time and focus he spent on that. As far as I'd just like to speak in favor of Joel King. I think that Joel will have a good sense of the appropriate complementary pieces and the boundaries of authority from the council with the mayor and the city manager when he goes into the agenda setting meetings. I'm pretty confident that he will do that to the best of his ability, and I think that his ability is up to the task.
Any further comment? Valerie?
Yeah, I would like to also speak out and honor Joel, just because I think he has the experience. He's been on council longer. I think at some point Vanessa will be wonderful. Yes. But I personally think that the experience that Joel has being on the council longer, number one, and number two, in his past, you know, he's done a lot of professional work and management. So I feel that at this point, he's the best choice.
Brian?
Thank you. So I've known Joel since he coached me in basketball in 7th grade. So Joel and I go back a long time, and I have the utmost respect for you, Joel. And I block your shot for sure. So I say this with respect. I do have some concerns with you being council president, and I'm just going to lay them out. I feel like that you could have come to meetings more prepared this year at certain times. I feel like at times it's been a little bit challenging for you to keep up on some of the topics. Just on Monday, I heard you ask what CDBG means, and you've been here 3 years. That should be a no-brainer. So, you know, we have a lot to get done this year, and I'm concerned that you might not be as effective as Councilor Auger. Thank you.
Further discussion? All right. Go ahead and complete your paper ballot telling me who your preferred candidate is. DJ, since you're on the phone, if you want to text me, that'll work. Okay, we have 5 nominations for Joel King. They include Rob, Valerie, Rick, Joel, and DJ. And 3 for Vanessa Auger, coming from Kurt, Vanessa, and Brian. And DJ, would you like to make the motion?
Yeah, I move to elect Joel King, the new council president.
Second from Valerie, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All right, let's call for the vote. DJ, you nominated Joel. How do you vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Vanessa?
No.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Brian?
No.
Motion passes 6-2. Congratulations, Joel King. You're the new council president. And if you want to move over to the seat closer to me, that is the council president's seat.
Well, I just want to say I'm honored by this election, and I'll do the best I can for all of us, and including those that didn't vote for me, because the sharing of power is a very important part of our democracy. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item of business tonight, we have council action item is to consider a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Tyler Technologies. Hi, Jason.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have a fairly brief presentation for you today. Wait till Karen gets my screen on. There we go. Thank you, Karen. And this is related to project LB 6413 Asset Management, where you have already taken action, and I'll go into that here in the past, to do a complete facility condition assessment. But this resolution is to approve a contract with Tyler Technologies, and it is to add an asset management module to the city's current enterprise resource planning system. So the relationship to your council goals are multiple, but primarily I wanted to point out this is to maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure, and it's to plan and develop infrastructure, public facility management plan, which was in your top 5 goals coming out of strategic planning last year. In June of 2020, the PAVE report recommended many changes for the facility division, including the implementation of a computerized maintenance management system, a facility assessment to understand the condition of all of the municipal facilities, and installation of an asset management system. Council made creation of a public facility management plan a 3-star and one of your top 5 goals at strategic planning last year. So this was a really important to you last year. Council has already approved the facility condition assessment, which is now being performed by the Meng Group. That work is well underway and will be completed by mid-February, and we expect to have a final report in front of you by either late first quarter or early second quarter of 2022. And upon completion, you're going to have a very detailed listing of all of the municipal facilities, including parks and equipment in the parks. We were able to get all of that included in the contract price. It'll have a base condition report and estimated capital planning projections. This data will create the framework for both an asset management system as well as a computerized maintenance management system. The city does currently have a computerized maintenance management system, and for those of you that have been with us for a while, and that was Beehive. We all remember the discussions about Beehive, and it is a very great program. However, it does have limitations in regards to vertical assets. And when we refer to assets, there are 2 types of assets. Vertical assets refers to buildings and their infrastructure. Horizontal assets are those assets which are underground in their pipes, valves, things like that. Beehive handles our horizontal assets, horizontal assets very, very, very well. But vertical assets, they don't deal with quite as well. The current CMMS also does not tie into our financial system at all. So we don't get any financial data and no ongoing condition data out of that system. Staff did evaluate multiple enterprise asset management systems, EAM. The reason we refer to them as enterprise asset management systems is because they reside on our primary business software and they're able to be used by all divisions. Prior to deciding on Tyler Technologies, this included live hands-on demonstrations, interviews with current users in Pacific Northwest as well as across the country. And in fact, we made them set up a live software platform with assets that we were able to go in and use and manipulate, which they grumbled at us a little bit, but they did it. It was a lot of work on their part, but they actually gave us a real runtime environment for us to go in and use the software, which was awesome for a long time. Previously, what you normally get is a salesperson that comes in, sits down beside you and walks you through the software, and lo and behold, they can make it do everything and then some because they're so used to using it. But this was us using it on our own, and we were able to make the software work quite well. So Tyler Technologies EAM is actually a module that has already been installed in our city's business software platform. It's just part of their base software. It is just not enabled on the side of Tyler. So Tyler will just have to enable that if you choose to move forward. EAM also works very well with rolling stock. Several of the customers that we interviewed use it strictly for their fleet management, both on the capital replacement asset side as well as on the ongoing maintenance side. Also, EAM is going to simplify reporting on financials because it's already tied to our financial system. We're going to be able to get better reporting on cost of work as well as cost of assets. So the cost implications. Cost for purchase, installation, and setup is still a fairly significant fee. It's about $91,000. Ongoing maintenance fees are expected to start at $7,095. That probably will increase every year by 1% or 2%, like everything else does. There are funds available within Project LB 6413 Municipal Capital Asset Plan, and then the maintenance fees will be paid through fleet and facilities user fees. We do tentatively have this call to action scheduled for tonight. Your alternatives are there before you, and with that, I would take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions? Brian.
Thank you, Jason. Could you go back one slide? So LB 6413, do we happen to know the balance in that account?
I don't off the top of my head, but as you remember during budget, I think we allocated over $550,000 to the project, and then the condition assessment came in under budget, and so there is more than enough to cover the $91,000.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
So Jason, is this the software then where we can look at our rotating capital expenses and maintenance of those, including the parks?
It will, especially once we, the hard part is we got to get all the data in, and then we have to start collecting data on the maintenance that's being performed, including the amount of dollars reinvested in those facilities, and that is exactly what this software is designed to do.
So then would it be realistic that upon implementation of this software, we'll have a good idea of what the parks maintenance budget should be, for example?
After a couple of years of data collection. So you have to build that history of how many hours you are spending and how many hours you need to spend. But after you get a couple of years worth of history built into the system, absolutely you can generate that number.
Any other questions? Valerie?
Yeah, I'm kind of, as Joel was, just kind of answering, talking out loud through my thoughts. So when we did the PAVE study, this is a result of the PAVE study that showed that through the years, there had been no logging of maintenance and all those sorts of things. And so that's what set us up to say we needed to do that in the future. An example being, so we specifically asked that parks be added on as well so that we had a real hands-on idea. So this is in all our wastewater, water, all the way across in the enterprise, as well as facilities like here where
It is. As you recall, when we first came and presented the facility condition assessment, we had limited it to municipal buildings. And council requested that we expand that to all of the parks facilities. And so we did, and we were able to include all of the parks facilities. That includes the ball fields and the little snack shacks, and I don't know what else to call them, but we have covered everything, and Meng has been going out there. They've been coming back and forth for a couple months now, collecting data, crawling into the attic crawl spaces, looking at stuff. It's been going very well. So you are going to have a very, very good sense, and I'm going to say it's probably going to be a very scary sense of your overdue maintenance on all of your facilities.
it's kind of like when we went through and did the stormwater master plan and the water master plan and all those sorts of things. So this is kind of the same, a follow-up on all of that, all that was not there before.
Yep.
But we recognize that as a business or anybody, you need to invest in. So thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions? Brian?
Yeah, so they're working on that capital asset management plan now. Do we have an estimated date when that's going to be completed?
Yeah, so we're expecting it to be done mid-February. I expect to be back in front of you in either March or April with the completed report and those numbers. My guess is those numbers aren't going to be ready for this year's budget, but they definitely will be for next year. We may have a sense of where they're at, but we'll already be into budget prep. But we'll have a sense of what we need to start setting aside.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Jason.
Thank you very much.
Council, any discussion on this item? Motion, are you interested in approving it? Joel?
But we have public comment.
I just had an observation.
We have public comment. It's a council action item.
Okay, thank you. Hang on a second, Joel. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, go ahead, Joel.
So one of the things that I think is important is that we have the appropriate tools to have the people that we have employed be efficient. And this is one of those tools that can be used to do that. Without it, you end up doing things manually, and it takes more time. Personnel is much more expensive than the software, and so the automation. I think it would be very feasible and encourage the city to continue to look at these kind of options.
Brian?
I move to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Tyler Technologies to provide an add-on asset management module to the existing ERP system.
Thank you. Is there a second? Valerie, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All right, Brian, you made the motion to approve the purchase. How do you vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. All right, moving right along, we have an appointment to make to the Housing Advisory Committee, and we have one candidate for this vacancy. Kathleen Foster is the applicant, and she has been recommended by the Housing Advisory Committee. She meets the special requirement of a renter in the low to moderate income category. Any discussion? Valerie?
Well, I'm glad to see this position has been open for quite a while, so it's nice to see, and it is a very important position to have a renter aboard. So I will go ahead and make a motion that we appoint Kathleen Foster to the Housing Advisory Committee.
Thank you. Is there a second? Vanessa, thank you. Any discussion? All right, Valerie, you made the motion to appoint Kathleen Foster. How do you vote?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 8-0. All right, next up is time for public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item before the council. It is, the intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the council as one body, not to individuals. At the conclusion of public comment, the council will have the opportunity to respond. This meeting will proceed in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members will be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, or other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. If you have a question regarding any government-provided service or a current city policy, please contact the city manager's office in an attempt to resolve the matter. And just to let you know, we have quite a few people here tonight who may not have spoken before, so the way this works, there's a green light that will come on. You have 3 minutes to speak. When the yellow light comes on, you have 30 seconds left, and then when the red light comes on, your time is over. Please don't go past the red light because I hate to have to cut you off. You are able to take your mask off for the purpose of clarity if that is your choice. First step is Melvin Davidson.
Good evening, Mayor, councilmen, and women. I'm here to give voice to the temporary housing of the homeless. And I want you to know that at one time in my life, for years, I was homeless. And everything that went along with it, the addictions, the prison terms, but through people who had a hand out to give me a hand up, one day I accepted that hand up. And now I'm the person that you see now, you know, a person who loves himself, love others, you know, and that's because of things and places put in place to give homeless addicts a hand up, you know. And pride, for many years, pride stopped me from accepting this hand, you know. And I thought I was being a help to people on the street violently, you know. But I was only hurting myself and my family, you know, because being this homeless person, it wasn't only me that I was hurting. I was hurting people around me, friends, family members, and society, my community. And to be a abiding citizen of the community, people like you and the community, you know, willing to give a hand to, you know, to help and provide a person such as I was a reason to start living again. And if you allow me to say, it's a verse in the Bible, in Ezekiel, I think it's 37, that speaks of dry bones. And I take that as a way of saying the dead, and that's where I was. I was dead, and the people out there, they are dead until somebody give them that breath of life. And, and who's to say where that breath of life will come from? And I just thank the people that prayed for me in this town. I didn't know. For years they prayed for me. And through their prayers, one day I just, decided to accept their hand and that generosity. And I come here to Grand Pass, and I've been welcomed with open arms. And I appreciate y'all for listening.
Thank you. We had to make sure, I could hear you fine, Melvin, but when people are talking, make sure you speak into the mic because it does help some of the people who are hard of hearing as well as people watching us at home. Make sure you get into the mic. Maureen Marvin.
Good evening. I am a resident of Grants Pass. I live out on M Street across from Riverside Park. And someone brought to my attention that you were considering using Riverside Park as a camping area rather than a daily use park. This brought concern to me as well as other members in my neighborhood. And I wanted to know if that was the case, why you would be choosing that, because the facility is meant for children to play. It's meant for daily groups like the Active Club to do their different activities. And it is a concern when we do have campers there because we see them leaving their litter. We see them using the berry bushes to urinate. We see them screaming at one another because they're in disagreement. And so I'm concerned about that. And I'm hoping that you can find another area in this town that will meet the needs of people that are homeless, that is close to the employment division, close to food, close to medical needs or schooling. And hopefully we can all be happy with that choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Deb Harpster.
Being the midget that I am, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good evening, members of City Council. I'm here to speak for those who have no voice or presence tonight. You may be of the firm belief that people are homeless because they choose to be, are drug addicts and alcoholics, and are mentally ill, but the largest new growth of those who are unhoused are actually people who live in their cars because they cannot afford housing. These people were formerly employed as teachers, athletes, disabled persons, vets, and those whose social security checks aren't enough to afford them an apartment. They're estranged from their families and very alone. It's a tragic situation. Now let me read to you an account from a Southern Oregon woman whose descent into homelessness happened in the blink of an eye. One minute she was a homeowner who raised horses, and the next she was lying inside of a plastic garbage bag on a park bench, wrapping anything she could find around her shivering body. How did this happen, you may be asking yourself. Quote, Once I had been a writer at Miami Herald and worked as a newspaper reporter there for 7 years. I owned my own home and started a nonprofit in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the country. But But like millions of other Americans, I made mistakes with credit cards and a second mortgage, and I lost my home in foreclosure. Then the house that I was renting burned down, and my mother and beloved beagle died of cancer. I was left without a home, and coming back to the world of the housed was an obstacle course of fees and fines that I could not pay. In the process, I learned that the most traumatized and vulnerable members of our society are often burdened with bills that they have no idea how to handle, making finding secure housing hard. As difficult as it is for me to speak in public, I do so because I'm very frustrated, horrified, if you will, that Grants Pass, Oregon still does not have a warming center or an urban campground with toilets, sinks, showers, and containers to hold trash and recyclables for people who have no protection or place to sleep. However, just down the road, Medford's urban campground that was established in July 2020 is run very successfully by Rogue Retreat, with boundaries and rules in which to live by and trained staff who provide supervision. People are grateful to live in a tent or a pallet shelter, receive supporting services like food, etc., etc. While fears and disapproval continue to slow down progress in Grants Pass, Rogue Retreat is doing an excellent job in Medford, and it makes no sense to me why an urban campground would not be similarly successful in Grants Pass. For those of you on the council who have not toured or seen the urban campground in Medford, please go and speak to somebody who lives there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Dee Mahana.
I am here to address the council tonight about the need to provide shelter for the most vulnerable in our community, specifically those who are unhoused and living in tents, vehicles, or on the street. As we know, many of these individuals are victims of violence. This morning, one of them was attacked in his tent and beaten and is currently being treated in the ER as I write this. We need to have a place for the unhoused to go now. I know the urban campground is in the process of finding land and going through contract negotiations, and the proposed shelter is close to the point of contract and hiring staff, and that this is great news, but these two solutions are down the road a bit. We have folks out there who need some solutions now, and this is not being treated as the emergency that it is. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have friends or family to stay with when they lose their health or loved one, or job, or home, or sanity, or whatever the situation that causes them to be unhoused. We must come along beside our fellow humans and provide for shelter first and foremost. I am grateful to the council for choosing to request provision for shelter for 2 nights last week. I was one of the shelter volunteers, and it was very well carried out, and the guests were exceedingly grateful. I want to propose some ideas that other towns are doing to provide a warm, safe space for individuals needing shelter. Run the buses all night. Perhaps there are retired drivers who would be willing to volunteer to help in this effort. Use the library with the help of extra volunteers and being open more hours. Use the large tents that the county was willing to loan the city last week for emergency shelter. I am not aware of there being a city staff person whose specific job is to develop and implement a plan for providing shelter for our unhoused. Perhaps we need to hire someone for this purpose, but in the meantime, let's do what we can now. When the call went out for volunteers last week for the emergency shelter, there were many who responded in spite of being a holiday weekend. It is my belief that the volunteers will come once the space is located. I understand that there is approximately $6.3 million available through the American Rescue Plan Act to the City of Grants Pass, and I am asking this council to make the unhoused the priority when deciding how these funds are to be used. Hopefully we can collaborate and serve those so they won't end up in the emergency room. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kathleen Leiden, excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor Bristol and council members. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor Bristol and council members. I volunteered at the Warming Center on January 1st and was grateful to have a chance to serve our poor. They were in such need and so grateful for the help. The next day, I listened to a talk that St. Mother Teresa of Calcutta gave when she was alive. She is so inspirational to me, I'd like to share some of what she said with you. She said, love starts in the family, and a family that prays together stays together. And prayer leads to faith, and faith to love, and love to action. Jesus said, what you do for the least of my brothers and sisters, you do for me. And when you give even a glass of cold water to my disciples, you will not lose your reward. President Reagan honored her with a Medal of Appreciation. To me, this displays the kind of love and generosity our country stands for. I was staying in a church when I heard of Mother Teresa's death. I didn't know much about her then, but she has become a teacher to me. Her meditations reflect the teachings of Christ and the love of Mother Mary. We are called to love those who are in need of not just a home and food, but of love. Our actions should reflect the love that God has blessed us with in serving all, especially the poor and marginalized. Thank you for all you've done and will do.
Thank you. Next up is Mike Pelfrey.
First of all, I'd like to say Happy New Year to everyone. I wish you all health. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for allowing me and the other citizens our 3 measly minutes of your time. I appreciate it. 3 minutes. I recently sent you an email requesting accountability regarding the vagrant homeless population. Now, I've been afforded the opportunity to listen to some of these folks talk about some of the homeless. The vagrant homeless population is not the regular homeless population that I think these folks are speaking of. I'm talking about the folks that basically disrespect our city on a nightly basis and cost us a lot of money. So the citizens of Grants Pass, which I am one of, deserve to know how our tax dollars are being spent on this portion of the population. I say this because I woke up yesterday morning and I looked out across the river where I live. Tussing Park is sitting there, and I witnessed a tractor and 2 of our park employees working their butts off cleaning up a vagrant homeless camp. Not a homeless camp, but a vagrant homeless camp. These people had trash everywhere, all over the place. That is not a type of citizen that we need to have running around our town. I don't care what their situation is, there's no excuse for vagrancy, period. I also emailed the city regarding the overwhelming number of RVs and dilapidated vehicles that are parked all over our community. I think you know what I'm talking about. There's not many streets along Grants Pass that doesn't have some car or RV that looks like it belongs in a dump. That vehicle continues to sit on the side of our streets. Now, I challenge you, the next time you see that, look around the vehicle. The other day, I was shopping and I saw along, I believe it's J Street, 3 RVs. There was a dog literally tied to a cement, like a cement blockade. No person in sight. But the amount of garbage, and what really concerned me is, I don't know if you know, but RVs carry chemicals. There was all sorts of stuff floating in the water. In regards to the warming shelter, I'd like to know why the city did not utilize the Riverview House during the recent cold weather. I live near this park. There's a house that's there that's empty that has a roof. Do you know how many cots that you can put in that particular house? A lot. And as far as these masks, which I will say, thank you for smiling behind them. But as far as your masks are concerned, do you know how many masks are running around? You can cut me off. I'm still loud enough to do this speaker thing. My concern is,
Time's
if this
up,
is such a
Mike.
pandemic, hang on, if
Thanks.
we're in a pandemic,
Time's
why
up,
is
Mike.
it that the masks we don't have collection spots?
Time's up. Thanks, Mike.
But lastly, finally, with the overwhelming amount of side effects from taking the
Next up is Stephen Nelson.
why on earth would the city of Grants Pass allow banisters in our city promoting a vaccine where
Chief, could you please escort this gentleman from the room?
the local citizens have no idea what the side effects of these vaccines are? Nothing says trust the science like 55 years of allowing these pharmaceutical companies to hide this information. See you, Brian. See you, Mike. Love you. See ya.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I hope over the years you have thought of me as a fair person during council meetings. This will be my final speech of a series on the amended demolition ordinance. You have heard me speak about the various airborne hazards of careless demolition: asbestos, fiberglass, black mold, rat and mouse contamination, meth chemical residue, lead, and soil botulism, and there are many others. You have heard me speak about my lung condition caused by an illegal demolition in my neighborhood and how to prevent this from happening to others. You have heard me speak about the arrogance or carelessness of certain developers and contractors and the need for city officials to be concerned about this problem. You have listened to a telephone message from Laura Glover to me stating that the amended demolition ordinance would be enforced. Mr. City Manager, your duties include the enforcement of city ordinances. This is in the city charter. The amended demolition ordinance is one of the most important that the city has, and yet is one of the most overlooked. Please listen to my idea. City officials should send notices to all developers and contractors regarding the enforcement of the ordinance and the need to be safe with hazards other than asbestos. By doing this, they will not have any excuses for illegal projects causing localized air quality and health concerns. Obviously, I care about this law, and this is why I have been standing here so many times. The only way that city officials will truly care about the safety of neighborhoods is by consistent and fair enforcement. Lastly, I accept the apology from Councilor DJ spoken a few weeks ago, but words are not the same as enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was all the blue slips I have. Is there anyone else here who wanted to provide public comment tonight? All right. Opportunity to review any public comment. Councilors, did you have any feedback you wanted? Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to very quickly say thank you for everybody for coming and providing public comment, and I appreciate the concern about us not adequately addressing the homeless emergency in our community, and I hope to discuss that later in the meeting. Thank you.
Vanessa?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone as well for coming this evening and having your concerns heard. I hope into the new year that the public outcry on the issue of homelessness, I hope that this meeting serves as a continuous reminder for any counselors who attempt to obfuscate progress on the issue. that this is the number one concern of our community at this time.
Joel?
Well, and I'd like to add that the comments were reflective, I think, of the people, all the comments. You hear all sides of the issue, and it's not one or the other, it's and. And so as we move forward, no one's above the law. Yes, some people need some help. There's a need for resources in the community for addiction and mental health treatment. That needs to be a priority, because if you just provide housing without that, it doesn't do any good. Family counseling, people getting divorced or not treating each other appropriately in their family that could take care of them and being then divorced from their family. Those emphasis items. So I would encourage all of us to not pick one side or the other. And I would encourage us to put an and in there instead of an or, so that we enforce the law fairly to everyone, including those that violate the law, like we have some now that are living in tents. And we emphasize the conditions that result in homelessness and the treatment of those conditions. Otherwise, we're just going to be wasting money. So, thank you for coming.
Rob?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody that spoke tonight, regardless of what direction you might lean or what your main concern is, and I really appreciate everyone's main concern. But I especially want to thank the people that stepped up and volunteered to work at the temporary warming center over the weekend. It's really wonderful, and I think it really verified that Council's decision to do that temporary warming center was a good move, and I really appreciate it. And hopefully, if we ever need similar help in the future, that you would consider volunteering again. Thank you.
Anybody else? Valerie?
Yes, I will just add and say thank you for coming. It is important to have and to keep us, I guess, on task. I do know that this council has worked hard to get something there. We haven't always had the support that we would like to have had, but the willingness of volunteers to step up has definitely been strong. So I do appreciate that, and I'm sure we will keep working hard to get it to happen, because I do think that is a priority. I wanted to talk a little bit about the campground in the park, Riverside Park, because that is not our intent to have a campground there. We are under an injunction, which means that we have to let them rest there, and we do have police officers down there, and in the injunction it says that any crimes or anything of that sort can be taken care of and by our police. And I do know our police are working very hard down there and trying to help those who do need help and are looking for a way out. And I look forward to there being an urban campground so that there's someplace better and not in our parks. But with the injunction, even if we have an urban campground, we can't force people to leave the parks until we work out the injunction. So, but trust us, we are working as fast as we can to get that done. So, and I also just wanted to address Steve and thank him for continually coming in. And I do know how near and dear to his heart this issue is. And I agree that maybe some sort of letter or something to sign that just lets people know that the rules are important and doesn't give them excuse for not knowing might be something that the city could easily address. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Valerie was saying regarding Riverside Park. I think it's definitely the intent of the council to clean up all of our parks as much as possible, including Riverside Park, and certainly not to make all of Riverside Park a homeless camp. There has been one idea of using that portion on the west end of Riverside Park next to the Caveman Bridge as a temporary urban campground because the city owns that property and we've had some difficulty locating another property. But I don't think that's anybody's first choice, and it's just, that was just an idea that was thrown out there at this stage. So we are working on an urban campground facility actively, and we'd like to have it at a different location. But just so everybody knows too, when we discuss urban campground, it's a managed facility. It's not a field where, you know, we tell people to go camp and, you know, with piles of garbage. It's not a free-for-all for sure. It's definitely an orderly and clean and hopefully very safe facility, whichever neighborhood that ends up being in, whether it was that part of the park or somewhere else around town. It's definitely not a free-for-all. How about emails, Karen?
So there were 5 emails suggesting locations for an urban campground, 2 supporting the warming shelter, 2 regarding homeless and the extreme weather, and 1 requesting an accounting of the amount of money the city has spent on cleaning up after the homeless population.
Thank you. Next up on our agenda tonight is the consent agenda, and these are items that are of such routine nature and without controversy that they're just approved in a single action. We have 2 items at the top that we're going to get a quick presentation on, and then we will have our new council president read the agenda before the vote. Looks like you have a few items on there to read tonight, Joel. Oh, good. Says he brought his glasses. We're stalling, waiting for you, Jason.
There we go.
Watch out before I get to the dad jokes, okay? All right, we have Adam Schultz up there on the screen. Take it away.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and I'll be covering both of those items in a single presentation here today, which is a presentation on the financial reports for the quarter ending June 30th, 2021, which is also the end of fiscal year 21, as well as for the first quarter of fiscal 22. For the FY 2021 financial report, which has now been audited, and I'm happy to report that we got an unmodified opinion, which is a technical term for a clean audit. And I'll be covering a few more items in detail for that report, and then going over a little bit of detail for the quarter ending September 30th. And of course, the relationship with council goals is to provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and the community. First, just reviewing some of the budget adjustments that occurred for fiscal year 2021. We had 1 supplemental budget, which was adopted on June 2nd, and had 2 main parts to it. One being lodging tax, and the other was the wastewater fund. Now, the lodging tax fund budget adjustment was due to increased revenues over a very conservative COVID budget, I would say, and fortunately we were able to get a lot more resources through our lodging tax than we had feared in the worst case scenario. And then in the wastewater fund, we transferred $40,000 from contingency to wastewater collection. Moving on to some revenue highlights. In the general fund, property taxes came in at 4.6% over budget, so that's good news. And then franchise taxes and some of our other taxes came in a total of 10% over budget. As far as other revenues are concerned, fees and charges brought in $278,000 more than were budgeted, and the building division ended 18% above budget, which is a good, strong indicator of property development. And also in the general fund, there was an additional $375,000 transferred in from lodging tax, which was very much part of that budget adjustment in the lodging tax fund. In the utility funds, water received 9% more than were budgeted, which was a combination of additional water sales. Also, the bulk water rate increase about halfway through the year brought in an additional $128,000, and then new service installations brought in $137,000 more than budgeted. So good, strong, healthy water fund activity there on the revenue side. And then wastewater, stormwater, and streets all came in very, very close to was budgeted, so no surprises there. Going on to expenditure highlights. Within the general fund brought back 10.7% savings, which was made up of savings from all the departments you see in the table below. You'll notice that public safety brought in the lowest amount of savings, coming in at 8% under budget. However, dollar-wise, that was $2.2 million just in public safety, and all the other departments combined only brought in $1.3 million of savings. And that is, of course, because public safety has been our largest division with the most personnel. So that's where we get most of our savings from. Overall, bringing in that 10.7% of savings is good and is, in fact, above average. We usually see about 6% savings. So a good year for the general fund. I will say my perspective is that it's likely the result of one of the levy failings. So there was in November. So that did bring in a bit of uncertainty, as well as some of the service level reductions conversations that happened. There was a bit of a freeze in activity until decisions had been made on how to move forward. So I would attribute some of those additional savings to both of those items. Then in the utility funds, water returned 6%, wastewater returned 6%, and stormwater returned 11%. And I've got the capital funds noted separately, and that is because the water capital, we budget to spend every last resource that we have, which gives us maximum flexibility as needs arise within any of those capital funds. So coming in 61% under budget for water capital is not necessarily an indicator of savings. It's just that we have extra money stored away for future capital projects, and that same rule applies to all three of the utility funds, capital funds. And finally, for fiscal year 2021, noting ending fund balances, the unrestricted general fund balance, which is those discretionary funds, don't have any strings attached to them, came in $4,471 lower than was budgeted. So that is very, very close to the projections that we had made during the budget season last year. And of course, the fund balance target range for the general fund is 30 to 40%, and we ended at 38%. So we're at a strong, high position in the general fund, especially as that relates to the next 3 years with the current public safety levy rate. The general fund in total was, or ended the year $91,000 better than budgeted. So that's good news, but most of that is in some restricted funds. And then for the utility funds, all of those were within or above target balance range. Then for support service funds, engineering was the only one that came in below the target at 23.1, but that's been slowly improving over the last couple of years, and staff is currently analyzing and working to make sure that we can fund engineering appropriately and adequately, but also fairly. So that's an ongoing project of ours. But then garage, facilities management, and information technology all came in above target. And I apologize, your packet has facilities management as property management. I did not update on that on time, so I apologize for that. Moving on to the quarter ending September 30th, 2021, starting with some revenue highlights. It's important to note that the resources in the general fund oftentimes are seasonal or are received after the quarter for which they were earned. For example, property taxes, we don't collect the bulk of our property taxes until November or December, so you're not going to see very much activity through September at this time. However, what we do receive from the county by this quarter are the assessed values for the coming year. And what that showed us is that the assessed values increased 3.8% over the prior year, 2.52% of that from new construction and 1.32% from existing properties. What that means is that the general fund will end up receiving about $22,000 more than we had budgeted, and unfortunate news being that the URA will receive about $52,000 less. So overall, about $30,000 short, so I can aim to do better on my property tax projections for the coming year. Some of that does have to do with delays of completion of building projects, so they just might not have been included in this assessment. And then the water fund, if you look at those revenues, they're running high at the moment, but that's because we're coming out of peak water usage season. So a larger portion of the water revenues come in during this time period than we'll see in the winter months. As far as expenditure highlights goes, oh, and I forgot to mention the September financial start on page 79 of your packet. And if you were to look at the percentage of year-to-date budget column, what that column tells us is if we took the budget for the entire year and divided it by 12 months, and now we've surpassed 3 of those months, where should we likely be on our expenditures? However, I will say that that snapshot of a moment in time is not a perfect indicator of performance for the entire year. One example or one explanation of that being because there's activity that could have happened in September that we didn't get processed and paid through accounts payable until October. So for the most part, and especially for the first quarter of the year, it doesn't provide a lot of insight into the quarter, but we're mostly looking for alarming numbers, see if anything really jumps out at us. If you do look at those percentage of year-to-date budget columns for transfers out and expenditures, some of the higher numbers would be lodging tax, information technology, and insurance funds. And lodging tax is high at the moment due to seasonality of lodging tax. We get a lot of our lodging tax revenues in the summer months, and so then we go ahead and we transfer as much as we have available within budget limits. So most of the transfers happen early on. And then for information technology and insurance funds, they have annual payments that happen at the beginning of the year. So they use a larger percentage of their budget in the first couple of months. So it's not an even distribution throughout the year. So overall, nothing too surprising, mostly good news for fiscal year 2021 and also for the first quarter so far. And with that, I can answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, if you can acknowledge the receipt of the quarterly reports as part of the consent agenda.
Thanks, Adam. Are there any questions? Valerie?
I don't really have a question, but I do want to thank Adam for this because it does mean a lot to me to have it, and I do think it just shows transparency to have it, the quarterly reports explained at an open meeting. So thank you, Adam.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Adam. All right. If we have no further questions, then we will move on with the consent agenda. Council President, you want to go ahead and read those?
Sure. A, motion acknowledging the receipt of the monthly and quarterly financial reports for quarter ended June 2021. B is for the monthly and quarterly financial reports for the quarter ending September 2021. Resolution authorizing the city manager to enter a 5-year contract for service with the Rogue Valley Council of Governments for total maximum daily load stormwater permit implementation and compliance. D, resolution acknowledging the letter of promulgation with Josephine County. E, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a Firewise grant agreement with Josephine County. F, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the F and 6th Streets stormwater replacement project. G, motion approving the minutes of the city council meeting of December 15th, 2021. H, the minutes of Committee on Public Art meeting of November 9th, 2021. I, the minutes of the Collaborative Economic Development Committee meeting of November 4th, 2021. J, motion acknowledging the minutes of the Bikeways and Walkways Committee of November 9th, 2021. And K, the last one, the minutes of the Tourism Advisory Committee meeting of November 2nd, 2021. And with that, I make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Vanessa, thank you. And in support of passing the consent agenda, Joel, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
All right. Consent agenda passes 8-0. Matters from mayor, council, and staff. We have one item to consider. A motion from the Historical Building and Sites Commission Were you going to read that for us, Brad, or do you want me to read it?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
So the motion is to recommend that the historic Redwood Empire sign be repaired and restored to the greatest extent possible and reinstalled at the same location and protected by the addition of bollards. Any parts or components that are not possible to repair should be replicated so that the finished sign is identical to the 2019 restored original sign in every regard, including size, shape, design, materials, and colors.
I know this is a little unusual to have at the staff comments, but we just had a couple of background slides for the council on this item. I'm sure you're all very well aware of the situation with the Redwood sign. But we just wanted to show a couple of pictures that kind of reflect the motivation for the Historical Building and Sites Commission and the motion that they did make to you that you just read. The determination, it's completely damaged. You can see by these photos what the situation is with the pole, and the sign did get moved to the Public Works yard, and that's where it is currently. As you may recall, on March 3rd of last year, the council approved the Redwood Empire sign as a historic local landmark. That was also at the recommendation of the Historical Building and Sites Commission. It's been in that site since 1941. The accident happened on December 18th, and then on December 23rd is the date when the Historical Building and Sites Commission met. That was an all virtual meeting. All members were there other than Commissioner Crowder. Sandra was not able to make it. So, and then here is the motion that you have before you. They were all ayes. No one voted against it, and then the one absent there. So this is at a situation where insurance is being worked with, and Jason, the public works staff, are kind of taking the lead on that. But since community development staff's, Historical Building and Sites Commission, I'm up here and just kind of giving you an update.
Thank you. So it sounds like staff is already pursuing an estimate on what it'll cost.
Yes.
Okay. I think that'll get us through to the next step. Does anybody have any questions about that? Brian and then Joel?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I just want to make clear, I heard what you said. Is the sign not salvageable? We're going to have to scrap the sign, or?
Yeah, Jason, you want to speak to that?
So can you go back to the photos, Brad? Thank you. One more, there we go. So the bottom half of the sign is likely not going to be salvageable. We believe that the top half of the sign, which is the one that's vertical, it just has a dent in that upper corner. We believe that one is going to be able to be repaired. The lower one is going to have to be replaced. But that is going to be determined by the sign contractors. We are having difficulties getting quotes right now. Everybody is busy. The vendor who did the great job on the restoration has quoted us a price of $1,250 to come down and evaluate the sign, which we are negotiating with them because we feel that that's a little high just for them to give us a price to repair it. So we're working on that diligently. We're going to restore as much of it as we can. We do have an issue. If you go forward to the post, the right post is actually completely sheared off at the ground, and we're concerned about how that's going to be able to be fixed, but we're working with that. We may have to get some engineering done to make sure that it's secure.
Thank you.
Joel?
So Jason, don't sit down, or maybe Brad can answer the question. So are there alternative fundings available, such as insurance and ODOT?
So insurance for sure. I know that ODOT expressed to Chair Warren that there might be some dollars available. We'll have to reach out to them. I don't believe that the insurance is going to cover the full cost of the repair.
Okay, then the other question I had was just a procedure question. So we probably do need a council motion today so that administration can proceed, or is that going to be within your authority?
I believe it's within our authority. The cost is going to be probably below Aaron's authority and probably within mine, if not even lower.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything further on this sign? Obviously, that was, some bad news when that happened there. All right, just to kick off mayor council comments. I know we talked about this a little bit on Monday, but again, wanted to thank the community volunteers and the Grants Pass School District, Josephine County Emergency Management, and UCAN for helping us with the warming shelter last weekend. I think it was a successful effort, and I volunteered there, and it was a fun way to spend the evening, just getting to chat with other volunteers as well as some of the residents there and learn a little bit about their lives and situations. So they were extremely, extremely grateful for the shelter, and I think, it's just we need to keep moving forward on some of these events, not necessarily a warming shelter pop-up situation like that, but just shelters in general. All right, anything else anybody want to share? I see Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's, this is on the topic of the urban campground, and it's winter, and the urban campground is, the end is not in sight. We don't know when that's going to be operational at this point. It's certainly not going to be operational this winter. And I think most of council, if not all of council, knows that we have $150,000 worth of pallet shelters sitting at the city yard unused. And we have people that could really, really use them. We also have a vacant lot across the street on 6th and A that is level, graveled, and big enough to accommodate said pallet shelters. So I would propose that we, I would ask council if they would be interested in having on the agenda next Monday the prospect of getting those pallet shelters, putting them together and getting them over there and setting up an interim stay safe community shelter to hold us over until we have a permanent site. So I guess I would ask for council support to put that on the agenda for next Monday.
All right, is there anybody else who wanted to talk? That's all your comments for tonight, Vanessa?
Yeah, just to respond, I would suppose putting that on the agenda and seeing what that looks like.
Is there other support for putting it on the agenda? Oh, thanks, Rob. All right, we will talk about that again next week then. Any other ideas for council comments tonight? I can't tell, is that a hand, Kurt? Okay, go ahead.
I'm just, I want to support Brian's request for going to the workshop. I think the 6 and A piece of property is a good property for that. Unfortunately, I'm not opposed to using the west side of the park still. I think that has a lot of advantages in that it'd be easy to migrate people there, and if this is just an interim situation, that would be a good way to get people into that, and then when we find a more permanent location, it'll be easy to move everybody there. I think we need to get something done, and we spent 3 hours talking about it on Monday, and I went away pretty down because we had spent so much time on it and really didn't seem to move an inch. So I think we should look at 6 and A. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Brian?
I have a couple other small items. So I heard from a group of constituents, and I guess this might be for you, Jason, or Brad, but it's regarding the Washington Boulevard tree replacement. And, you know, they didn't really know what was going on, so they were concerned, but I let them know what's happening. And so they understood the situation. But when I told them that we weren't able to put the trees in the middle anymore and we had to offset them off to one side, they're like, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer. And they actually came back to me with an idea of, they said, could we alternate them on each side as we go down so it looks more uniform? And I was like, well, it sounds like a decent idea. So I told them I would bring it up and see if that is a viable option for that project.
I don't want to say yes tonight because I don't know the layout of the pipes, but it sounds like a good idea to me. We'll definitely look into that.
Okay, great.
All right, Joel, then Rob.
The trees are going to be planted next week, and it's a volunteer activity. If anyone wants to get involved, I encourage you to do so. And Tony Meekum is the coordinator of that, our city forester. If I remember correctly, Jason, that pipe runs down to one side. I think it's 10 feet away from the curb. And so to alternate them, I think will be difficult, and also to protect the infrastructure. But it's good to check on it.
Rob?
Yeah, actually, I made that same suggestion back when we were discussing this project, and it's my recollection, Joel, and I may be wrong, it's my recollection that we were told by Jason that the water line runs right down the middle. But to me, it's again, having it on one side only is I think, kind of funny looking. It would be potentially funny looking, and alternating, I think, is probably a really good move if we can do it. And I think Jason told us that the water line goes right down the middle.
All right, well, they will look into it one way or the other. Any other topics? Brian?
Yeah, I just had a couple of quick questions for the chief. The first one is I was going by the police station, and I noticed that we had a vehicle for the new parking enforcement officer. I saw it said parking enforcement on the side, and I was just curious, is that a new vehicle, or is that something that we've had in fleet for a while?
It does say parking enforcement on it, and that is a refurbished vehicle. We decided we could get some value out of that Ford Taurus, I believe it is, and we hope to have that on the road soon.
Awesome, thank you. And then the other quick question is regarding last week when I know your officers were down at the park checking on the unhoused, and I was just wondering if you have any knowledge if they were notifying people of the warming center that was up last week, or how that played out.
Oh, for sure. The entire staff were asked to do that, and I think I may have asked some people, and they gave me that funny look like, of course we're doing that. So yeah, the entire staff, to include probably our records specialist, even taking the incoming phone calls.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? Staff comments? Nothing tonight? All right. We do have an executive session scheduled, so how about a motion to adjourn into executive session? Valerie?
I move that we move into executive session.
Thank you. Second from Rick. Thank you. All in favor of adjourning into executive session, raise your hand
Aye.
or say aye. Any opposed? Nope, everybody agreed to it. The council will now meet in executive session for the purpose of discussing those subjects previously noticed for this executive session, which is to discuss real estate property transactions. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660 and more specifically under the subsection of that statute, which I just mentioned. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No